Bill Reardon is an architect, and a very good one. Since he was in high school, he knew what he wanted to do, unlike many of his friends who didn't decide on a career until they graduated from college. Bill received a Bachelor of Science in Architecture from the University of Maryland. He couldn't immediately pursue a master's degree because his family still needed to send his younger sister and brother to college. Or rather, Bill managed to get a good job at a well-known architectural firm in Northern Virginia. He started from the very bottom, doing nothing more than drafting work. After all, you don't just start designing skyscrapers. However, Bill felt comfortable in his job and was completely familiar with the computer-aided design software he was using. By being careful with his income, Bill was able to save up the funds necessary to obtain a master's degree. He was fortunate enough to be accepted into the graduate program at Purdue University. His company was sorry to see him leave because they were very pleased with his work. Bill's savings were not enough to cover all his expenses, so he still had to work. He found work as a draftsman for a local construction firm that did a lot of contracting work for the city. As for work, he had a flexible schedule, but most of his work was still done at night. Because he often had to work on the computer for hours, both for his employer and for homework for classes, he often found himself in the cafeteria late at night. He would find a quiet corner somewhere and sit at the computer until it was time to go to class or go home. One evening, while he was in the dining room, he met Joan. Sometimes in the evenings, the dining room is so empty that there are often more workers than customers. Joan was one of the workers. Bill noticed her the first night she came to work. Although Joan was dressed like a waitress, with little makeup and unfashionable hairstyle, he recognized her as a very beautiful woman in both face and body. Over time, they became more and more sociable with each other. She often brought him coffee, although she was not asked to do so. Then she would sometimes stay and chat with him for a few minutes, being careful not to take up too much of his time if he was working hard on a project. Bill learned, among other things, that she was a single mother with a 1-year-old child at home. Although county social services helped her earn some income, she still had to work 2 jobs to make ends meet. Bill realized there was a mutual attraction between the two of them and eventually asked her out on a Saturday night. Joan told him that she really wanted to date him, but she had no friends or relatives who could look after the child, and child care costs were very high. Bill wasn't going to let the cost of a nanny hold him back and told her he would take care of those expenses. She felt genuinely bad and embarrassed that she was so poor that she had to rely on Bill's good nature to spend time with her. For Bill, it was worth it. Bill came to Joan's small apartment on Friday after class. Joan was there and dressed for the date. Her dinner attire confirmed Bill's earlier assessments of her beautiful face and almost voluptuous figure. Nanny Joan, a pretty young high school student, was there too. Joan was eager for Bill to see her little daughter and carried her into the living room to introduce them. Bill thought it was the most beautiful child he had ever seen. Her name was Joyce. This was the beginning of Bill and Joan's relationship. Bill fell in love with Joan and her child over the next few months. He was not at all embarrassed by the fact that Joan was a single mother with a child. Joan fell in love with Bill and was very grateful that he accepted Joyce so easily. Joan admitted that she gave birth to a child out of wedlock. She said she was in a long-term relationship with her high school sweetheart. While they were both attending community college, she became pregnant. Her boyfriend wanted her to have an abortion, but she refused. Soon after, he left her and went to study in another state. Since then, she has struggled with the challenges of raising a child and living expenses. Social services helped by providing a portion of her income. Her family also helped from time to time, but they themselves were not very well off. She worked 2 jobs to supplement her income even more. After a few months of dating, they spent the night together. As Bill neared the end of his master's program, he asked Joan to marry him. Joan was overjoyed. She found a man she loved, and a man who really wanted to be the father of her child, and, in fact, loved the child as much as she did. After graduation, Bill, Joan, and Joyce moved back to Northern Virginia, where Bill found work with his old employer. This time, due to his advanced education and experience, He was hired to a much higher position than before and with a significantly increased salary. Bill and Joan rented a 3-bedroom townhouse with a 2-car garage. This was more than enough for their small family. A year or so after they moved into their new home, Joan became pregnant. They had a boy who was named Richard, but who received the nickname Richie. Bill continued to work successfully as an architect, but he was unhappy designing large buildings, shopping centers, and apartment complexes. Part of his dissatisfaction stemmed from the fact that he was still only doing a small portion of the project work. In addition, he was rarely able to see the results of his efforts because it usually took years before a project was completed, and the projects were often out of state. His real interest was in designing houses. When Joyce was 7 and Richie was 5, Bill found a house for them to buy. It was ideal from his point of view. It was on a cul-de-sac in a good area, and the school district had a high rating. Although the house might seem ordinary to many people, it did not to Bill. His trained architect's eye saw it as an ideal home, where he could raise his children and run his business. The house has 4 bedrooms with 3.5 bathrooms, a large living room, a large family room, and a large dining room. There was also a 2-car garage, but what really convinced Bill to buy the house was the presence of a full walkout basement where he could set up his home-based architecture business. Although the basement was unfinished at the time, Bill saw it being laid out in such a way that he could receive clients, create his designs, and make models as needed. Additionally, the basement had French doors opening onto a small, secluded, landscaped patio. The asking price was $700,000, and Bill quickly offered to buy it for that amount. He knew that it would cost at least another $100,000 to renovate and arrange the basement to suit his needs. However, he considered it completely justified. Joan also thought it was perfect, and the children were delighted with the idea of each of them having their own bedroom. 12 years later, Bill had a thriving home design business. In addition to gaining a good reputation as an architect capable of designing everything from mansions to quads, he held several patents on home design ideas. He developed a series of extremely inexpensive houses suitable for people who essentially could not afford a conventional house. He also invented rollout houses for people in less developed countries that provided most of the amenities and protection of a home, including water, gas, and electricity connections, without the need for costly and extensive foundations and site work. He also had designs that could be expanded over time without the house looking like awkward additions had been added to it. A family might start with a 1-story, 2-bedroom home and end up years later in a large, beautiful 4- or 5-bedroom home that grew with the family and family finances. Soon after Richie started kindergarten, Joan became interested in work. She decided to start a career in real estate. She believed that being a real estate agent would allow her to set her own schedule and thus be home with her family when needed. Plus, she could earn money from time to time, which would give her a sense of contribution to the family budget. Bill agreed with her career choice and thought it was a good idea for her to get out of the house and do something challenging. The cost of the real estate agent training program was very low. Within a few weeks, Joan passed her real estate exams and state exams. She chose a local real estate company that only had a dozen or so offices. As it turned out, Joan was a natural real estate agent. Her attractive appearance and friendly personality made working with people an ideal profession for her. After a slow start and a few misses, she began to perform very well as both an agent representing sellers and an agent representing buyers. She preferred to work with customers. Over time, Joan became more and more successful in the real estate business. Within a few years, she was one of her company's leading agents, and she made a significant contribution to the family budget. Eventually, an opportunity arose to become the managing broker of the new office, and Joan applied for the position. With all the certifications and additions to her original license, Joan also took the time to obtain her broker's license. Her company was excited to have her manage their new real estate office. Under Joan's leadership, she quickly recruited 17 real estate agents to work for her. Now she not only earned money from her commissions, but also received a percentage of the commissions of her subordinate agents. As you might expect, Joan's dedication to her career took more and more time away from her family, and from Bill. Joan left home early and returned late in the evening. She often worked on weekends when there was an open house showing. She also provided additional training to her agents on weekends and evenings so they could work freely with clients during the week. As Bill's business was tied to his home, Bill began to take on more and more household responsibilities. Bill got up early to make breakfast and pack lunches for Joyce and Richie and walked them to the bus stop. He also helped them with their homework in the evening, participated in school activities, and attended their sporting events. If his wife was going to be late, Bill took responsibility for preparing dinner. He became quite a good cook and often cooked with Joyce, trying out new recipes. Intimacy between Bill and Joan became increasingly rare. Joan was often tired when she came home, and after dinner and a glass of wine, she went to bed early. Bill tried repeatedly to rekindle their intimacy, but none of his attempts were successful for long. Bill's story began one late morning on a spring day. He was returning home from the airport, where he had dropped his wife off on a flight to her annual 3-day real estate convention. As he turned the corner onto his street, he noticed a white SUV parked on the curb in front of his house. As he pulled into his driveway, he saw a woman sitting on his porch steps. He parked the car in the driveway rather than in the garage to meet his guest. When he got out of the car, the lady on the porch stood and waited for him to approach her. Bill assessed the lady from a distance. She was of average height. Her light brown hair was tied up on her head. She had a sweet face. It would have been beautiful if she had been wearing makeup, which she wasn't. The lines on her face told Bill that she was 40 or 45 years old. She had a good figure, which she didn't try to show off in her slate pants and loose white blouse. However, Bill could see that she had a narrow waist and impressive breasts. The lady spoke first. "Are you Bill Reardon?" she asked, at the same time extending her hand for a handshake. "Yes, I am." Bill answered both her questions and the handshake. Before he could ask the lady what her name was, she spoke again. "Nice to see you. My name is Beverly Dumont. How can I help you, Miss Dumont? We had a meeting that I forgot about. Please call me Beverly, and if you don't mind, I'll call you Bill," she said. "And no, we don't have any meetings. However, it is important for me to talk to you," Bill replied. "Beverly and Bill, so be it." Bill noticed that Beverly wasn't smiling and didn't seem particularly happy. "Please come into the house." As Bill opened the front door for her, he noticed Beverly picking up her backpack, which seemed quite heavy. Entering the house, Bill led Beverly into the spacious family room. Beverly chose a seat on the sofa in front of the large coffee table. Bill was about to settle into his favorite rocking chair, but remembered his good manners and asked his guest if she would like something to drink. "A glass of wine would be nice," she replied. "Dark red wine, if you have it," she added. "Strong red wine is my favorite," Bill replied. Bill went into the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of his favorite Cabernet Sauvignon Carnivore. He returned with 2 glasses of wine and a bottle, which he placed on the coffee table. Beverly immediately took several large sips of wine. Bill noticed that she was worried about something. "How can I help you, Beverly?" Bill asked, giving his voice a more serious tone. Beverly took another sip of wine and then said, "What I came to talk about is very personal and very difficult to discuss. Your feelings will be greatly hurt, so I'll just have to get it straight. I am the owner of Dumont, a furniture rental and home decorating company. Our main source of income is decorating homes for sale. We work directly with real estate agencies and agents. I don't do this myself. I manage the day-to-day operations of the company. My husband, Leonard, is our company's marketing representative. In this capacity, he personally interacts with brokers and agents. Your office knows him well, as does your wife." The tone of Beverly's last sentence made Bill feel a slight lump in his stomach. "Go ahead, Beverly," he said emotionlessly. "I'm sorry to tell you this, Bill, but my husband and your wife are having an affair. As far as I can tell, it's been going on for over 7 months. They meet at least once a week, usually in a house that's for sale and furnished enough for the availability of a bed. The house is always advertised as available by appointment only. And of course, your wife does not allow any meetings while they are using it. Now it was Bill's turn to take a long sip of wine. I'm really having a hard time believing this, Beverly. Do you have any evidence, photos, videos? Yes and no, Beverly said. At first, I only had vague suspicions that something was wrong. It was the little things that seemed strange to me. For example, my husband did not do as much work in a day as he should. Sometimes I could not reach him on the phone, and his cell phone was turned off, so I couldn't find him through Friend Finder. Then I would sometimes smell perfume on him, coinciding with the days I couldn't find him. There were more incidents, but eventually I came to a conclusion that he may be having an affair. I can't tell you how worried I was when I came to this conclusion. I was nervous, I lost weight, I couldn't work. I was a complete mess. So I decided to find out for sure and hired a private detective agency to keep an eye on him. Within a week, they informed me that they saw him enter the house for sale with a woman. They arrived in different cars. The woman's car had a real estate logo on the door. They usually spent about 2, sometimes 3 hours there, and then drove off in separate cars. The detective agency had no trouble identifying the woman as Joan Riardon, your wife. This same scenario was repeated week after week. However, I have no photographs or videos of them actually having sex. Today was about discussing this. I'm really sorry to bombard you like that, Bill, in such an insensitive manner. I really wish someone would approach me the same way. Then I wouldn't have to have months of doubt and uncertainty. Bill was confused, not knowing what to say or how to react. He was about to tell Beverly that he still didn't believe her when their conversation was interrupted by a call on Beverly's cell phone. Beverly apologized, raising her hand to indicate that she needed to take this call. Bill only heard one side of the conversation. "How are preparations going?" she asked her interlocutor on the phone. "Do you have all the rooms under control, audio and video? Can we test this soon? Okay, I'll connect." Beverly hung up and turned to Bill. "Can I connect to your internet, please?" As she said this, Beverly took her laptop out of her backpack and placed it on the coffee table. Like a robot, Bill gave the password for his internet connection to Cox. While Beverly turned on her laptop, she continued her conversation with Bill. "You just returned from the airport, right?" Having answered her question, she continued. "You took your wife on her flight to Atlanta for a regional real estate conference." "Yes," said Bill. "She goes there every year. She told me that she learns a lot about selling real estate, attracting buyers and sellers and so on. Sometimes she buys new software that helps in her office, and she makes contacts with various companies related to real estate." "Like mine," Beverly interrupted. "I drove my husband to the airport about 2 hours ago. I'm sure he's on the same flight as your wife. My husband attends the same conference every year. He even gives a presentation on the benefits of decorating to a general audience. It was very compelling and attracted a lot of clients, both real estate offices and individual agents. Did you know, Bill, that according to my investigations, your wife has not booked a room at the conference hotel? Neither in her name nor in her company's name. I think she is going to share my husband's room." Beverly looked at her watch. "Their plane should land about now. I don't expect a call from my husband until he gets to the hotel. Perhaps your wife will call you too." Bill replied, "Yes, she said she would call as soon as she landed, and again later in the day after she checked into her room." Bill felt a knot forming in his stomach, getting bigger and tighter. "Tell me what's going on, Beverly," he demanded. "You deserve to know everything," Beverly replied. "I have suspected for some time that your wife and my husband intended to spend time together in a hotel having sex. I wanted to catch him red-handed on video. A few days ago, I rented a suite at their hotel in the name of my company. Yesterday and this morning, my investigators installed numerous video cameras and recording devices throughout the room. The cameras are connected to a server that streams the events live to me through my computer and to a similar computer installed in my lawyer's office. Everything will be recorded." Bill asked, "What's stopping someone else from seeing these images?" "You need a password to access the site. My lawyer and I are the only ones who know it," Beverly replied. Bill's phone rang. He knew from the ring tone that it was Joan. "Just arrived," Joan's cheerful voice said as soon as he answered. "How did the flight go?" asked Bill. Easy. I decided to treat myself and flew first class. I had a good lunch and even had time to take a short nap. Of course, the company will pay for all this, as well as the conference and the hotel room. Bill thought it out for her. And you can write it off on your taxes as a business expense, right? That's right, honey, she said. Next year you should come with me and we'll turn it into a vacation. Atlanta is a great place for tourists. And for lovers, Bill said without even thinking. Beverly quickly looked up and shook her head, as if telling Bill not to hint at his suspicions. Then it's a date, Bill quickly added. We'll make it a vacation, even if you have to deal with your real estate colleagues all day. At night, I'll just be waiting for you in your bright red negligee. Joan replied, My luggage is here. I have to go. I'll call you in the evening from the hotel. It may be early in the evening because there is a cocktail party scheduled in the conference room at 7 p.m. Okay, honey, Bill finished. I love you. Don't ever forget that. I love you too. Bye-bye. Bill turned to Beverly. I still can't believe she could do this to me, to us, to our family. I didn't want to believe it either, Beverly said. All these little clues were eating away at me like acid. Now, after all these months, I need to know for sure. Beverly typed a few characters into her computer. This is it, she exclaimed. Her phone rang. She looked at the caller ID, noted to Bill that it was her detective, Paul Drake, and answered the call. I see everything, she said. Then, again, Bill only heard one side of the conversation. Yes, the picture is very clear. How do I switch between rooms? What about the audio? Okay, I'll turn up the volume. Bill then heard a voice through the computer. How can you hear me? Beverly replied, Clean and clear. The voice continued, I'm about to walk from room to room in the suite, and I want you to follow me as you switch between cameras. I'll talk as I move. Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing, 1, 2, 3. Everything works, Beverly concluded. Her detective's voice continued, I know they've landed. We're going to clean up the room now and leave. We'll be in the lobby when they arrive, and I'll text you what we see and take pictures of. Thank you, Paul. I'll be waiting for your calls. Beverly turned to Bill and said, I need to make one more call to my lawyer. Beverly pressed the speed dial on her phone and her lawyer answered immediately. Are you online? Okay. You see and hear everything then? And everything is recorded, right? When Beverly hung up, she took another long sip of wine, emptying her glass. She poured herself more wine. Then she turned her attention back to Bill. I know it was intrusive for me to force you to face it this way. Even if you believed me, I'm not sure you would want to see it live. Bill became increasingly sullen as the conversation continued. He told Beverly that he might need something stronger to get through this and headed into the kitchen, then turned and asked Beverly if she wanted something stronger. Beverly was pleased with the bottle of wine. Bill returned from the kitchen with a bottle of bourbon and a glass. While they waited, Beverly tried to talk about a lighter topic. My detectives told me that you have a daughter and a son. Is that true? Yes, I have. My daughter is Joyce. In fact, I adopted her when she was a year old when I met Joan. She is now in her second year at university. Although it is not far from home, we decided to rent for her a small apartment she shares with friends. She enjoys sports, art, and many other things, but tries to come home on weekends when she can. What about your boy? Beverly asked, eager to keep the conversation going. His name is Richard, but everyone calls him Richie. He was born 2 years after Joan and I got married. He's in high school now. He's into sports too. In fact, he's at a football game this weekend. He will be home on Saturday afternoon. Bill thought for a moment, and then added, It's probably better that they're both out of the house right now. The conversation became awkward until Bill asked Beverly, What's your story? Who is this man who slept with my wife? Beverly sighed and then began her story. The Dumont Furniture Rental and Home Decorating Company was founded by my parents over 30 years ago. I worked for them until they retired and then took over the management. When they died, the business was taken over by me. The company was moderately successful, and as it grew, I realized I needed help, especially with marketing. I met Lenny, about 7 years ago. Although he was 5 years younger than me, we hit it off straight away. Lenny is very charismatic and very articulate. He is a born salesman. After our wedding, he took over marketing. This included advertising, sales, customer service. He created our company website. The nature of his work meant that Lenny was often away from home. He regularly went to every real estate office within a 100-mile radius that needed decorating, as well as office furnishing companies that needed office furniture. Lenny attracted many clients. He justified his salary. Now, I suspect that he cheated on me even before he met your wife, but for some reason, he became particularly infatuated with her. I think this is the longest affair he has ever had. Beverly continued. Although Joan may be 10 years older than my husband, she is still a very beautiful woman. And like my husband, she is also a natural salesman. I think together they have convinced each other of what attractive people they are. Bill and Beverly sat in silence for a while. Finally, the uncomfortable silence was broken by a text message on Beverly's phone. They entered the hotel, was all the text said, but it was accompanied by a photo of husband Beverly and wife Bill holding hands at the front desk. They are heading upstairs, was the next text. Bill, who had not looked at Beverly's computer screen until now, stood up from his chair, grabbed a bottle of bourbon and a glass, and sat down next to Beverly on the couch. She hugged herself in anticipation of what she was afraid to see. The audio sensitivity was sufficient for them to hear the key card being inserted into the door lock. It quickly opened, and Lenny quickly dumped their luggage onto the floor. Even before the door closed, Lenny turned Joan around to face him and kissed her passionately. Joan reciprocates his feelings. "No more waiting, honey," Lenny said. "Not a minute." With these words, the two lovers began to undress and help each other. When they were left in only their underwear, Lenny picked Joan up, carried her into the bedroom, and threw her in the middle of the bed. He jumped onto the bed next to Joan and unclasped her bra. Without further ado, the two spouses indulged in each other, while Bill and Beverly watched. Beverly was no longer a woman in control of her feelings. She cried. "How could he?" she asked, no one in particular. "I loved him so much." Bill put his arm around Beverly, pulling her closer. He was also on the verge of tears. "I needed it," Joan said. "Give me a few minutes of rest, honey, and we can do this again." "Rest, handsome," Joan replied. "I need to call home." Bill watched as his wife sat on the edge of the bed, covering herself with nothing but the sheets. She took the phone and dialed the number. A few seconds later, Bill's phone rang. He didn't know if he could, answer. He replied while looking at Beverly's computer screen. "Hey, honey, everything's settled? Going to take a nap before heading downstairs for a social event? Just wanted you to know I love you." Bill watched the screen as Lenny sat down on the bed behind Joan and began kissing her neck and shoulders. Bill couldn't stand it any longer and simply said, "Goodbye, see you Sunday afternoon." Then he hung up. On the screen, Bill saw Joan react as if this was an unexpected end to their conversation, but she simply shrugged. "Ready?" asked Lenny. Bill couldn't watch anymore. He didn't think Beverly would either. They were both still crying. Bill tried to divert their attention from what was happening in the hotel room by suggesting that perhaps Beverly would like to see his architectural office in the basement. Beverly readily agreed. He led her downstairs to his offices. Bill took a bottle of bourbon with him, and Beverly took her wine. He showed her his computer-aided design, CAD system, his modeling table, and his client area. Beverly was impressed by the many drawings and paintings on the walls of the houses Bill designed. Eventually, they came out onto a small outdoor patio near the basement. Bill and Beverly discussed their plans. Both believed that divorce was the only option, although Bill was not entirely sure. Beverly was in a good financial position. She was the sole owner of her company. Essentially, Lenny was her employee. Although he was valuable in marketing for Dumont in recent years, he was replaceable. Over the next few hours, Bill and Beverly tried to do things that would take them away from the computer. Moreover, while the two cheating spouses were at their social event, What was happening in the hotel did not bother them. Bill suggested making sandwiches. They spent the time trying not to think about the events at the hotel. Around 10:30 p.m., Bill and Beverly heard voices coming from the computer and settled down together on the sofa with drinks. The cheating spouses returned to their hotel room. Although Joan couldn't resist Lenny, he pushed her away, saying he had to call his wife. Beverly's phone rang. "Hello, honey," she said. "Hey, doll," Lenny replied. "I've already checked in. Great room. It's a suite. Has a sitting area, bar, microwave, and refrigerator. Thank you." "You're welcome, darling. I thought you'd need some extra space to entertain clients while you enthrall them with our capabilities. This will all be chalked up to marketing." While Lenny was talking on the phone, Joan was busy untying his pants. Soon she lowered his trousers and briefs to his feet and knelt down. Lenny was distracted and could barely concentrate on the conversation. He needed to end the conversation. "I'm pretty tired, honey. I'll call you tomorrow. Love you." Beverly replied, gritting her teeth, "You have no idea how much I loved you too." The change in verb tense was not noticed by Lenny compared to what Bill and Beverly observed. They watched their spouses for a few more minutes. Joan asked Lenny, "How long have you been cheating on your wife?" Lenny replied, "Ever since we got married. I adore women. They are like flowers waiting to be picked. Married women are especially attractive because they are not usually looking for a permanent relationship and often tell me that they still love their husbands." "And you?" Joan responded. "I love my husband madly. He saved me and my daughter from a life of poverty. We have a wonderful son together. Bill saved enough to send them both to college. He sent me to real estate school. We have a very nice house and many friends. We have a wonderful life together." "Then why is this?" asked Lenny. "I learned a while ago," Joan continued, "that sex sells. When I first became a real estate agent, I was seduced by a rich house buyer. He said he would buy the house for my price if I slept with him. He was nice, looked like a man, and treated me very politely. I reluctantly agreed. He took me to his hotel room and we had sex, and I liked it. And I earned a huge commission. After this incident, I decided that if I need to use sex to sell houses, I will do this. It didn't happen very often, maybe a couple times a year, but I did what was necessary for the deal. Bill was actually very happy for me and told me that this was my personality that made me a great real estate agent. He was partly right. You're actually the first man I've had a long-term romance with. All I can say is that I love the way you love me. However, I don't expect our relationship to last forever. We'll get tired of each other. From a friend over time, until we simply stop communicating. Then you will become just a secret, pleasant memory." "I need to get home before I'm too drunk to drive," Beverly announced. She took out a pen and pad from her backpack and wrote something down. "If you want to watch this disaster on your computer, here is the site address and password." She turned off her computer, closed the lid, and put it in her backpack. "I'll be back here Sunday morning after they leave the hotel to give you the DVDs my lawyer recorded. Let me know your intentions. I'm going to confront my husband right away." Bill walked Beverly to her car. When he opened the door for her, she turned to him and hugged him tightly, and they hugged each other for several minutes. Then she left. When Bill returned to the house, he went to his office and unplugged the laptop that was connected to his monitor, printer, and other peripherals. He brought it into the family room, placed it on the coffee table, and turned it on. Then, after he turned it on, he entered the website address and password. He didn't see his wife in the first picture of the hotel room and switched once or twice until the picture of the bed appeared. It was night and the lights were off, but the low-light camera easily revealed that his wife was in bed with Beverly's husband, Lenny. For the first time, Bill was able to analyze his feelings. He was wounded, so wounded. How would Joan do this to him, to them, to their marriage? And he was humiliated. It seemed that the other man was much more attractive to his wife than he was. In addition, Joan admitted that she had sex with other men to sell houses. This confession alone made him believe that divorce was the only answer. Bill thought their sex life was comfortable. Of course, this was not the passionate embrace that they experienced in the first years of their life together. But most married people know that the intensity of sex decreases over time, and the desire for sex on the side is the price you pay for a happy marriage. Joan seemed to disagree, and then Bill got angry. How could she do this to him, to the family he loved, to the children, to the marriage? He felt he could not justify Joan's actions. The only solution was divorce. He couldn't be a conscious cuckold. His pride and self-esteem would not allow him to be married to a woman who had shown him such disrespect. Bill continued to drink, too much. He became sleepy. The taxi stopped in front of the Reardon house. It might have parked in the driveway if Joan Reardon's car hadn't been parked there. Joan Reardon stepped out of the taxi just as the trunk of the taxi opened. Looking around, she noticed her daughter Joyce sitting on the steps of the porch. She called to her daughter, "Could you help me with my luggage, please?" Joan turned to pick up her suitcase, which the driver had set out on the sidewalk. She was going to leave one bag for Joyce, but when she looked back, she was still sitting on the steps. She had not moved. With some difficulty, Joan dragged her suitcase across the lawn, one bag slung over her shoulder and her briefcase in one hand. Joyce watched her without expression. When Joan finally reached the cement path in front of the flower pots on the porch, she threw everything down. She was clearly angry. "You could help me, you know." Joyce didn't react or say a word. "What are you doing at home anyway? I thought you were at university?" Joyce replied, "I came home Saturday morning when I heard you were leaving for a conference. I wanted to spend some one-on-one time with Dad. And where the hell is your father? He knew what flight I would be on. I waited for him for over an hour. I called him 10 times, and all the calls went to voicemail. What is he doing that is so important that he cannot meet me?" Joyce replied, "Dad is with Richie at Lake Ann Park." Joan exploded. "Why the hell is he there and not at the airport?" "They decided to have a couple of beers together, relax and be alone," Joyce replied. "I don't know what happened to him, but I'll give him the heat as soon as he gets home." Joan walked up the porch steps and walked to the front door. When she tried to open it, she found the door locked. "Damn it!" She cursed and began rummaging through her bag for her keys. Joyce watched her with quiet pleasure. When Joanne tried to unlock the door with her key, she discovered that the key did not fit the lock. "What the hell is going on here?" she said with irritation. "Your keys don't fit anymore, Mom. Dad changed the locks yesterday." "Why the hell did he do that?" Joan exploded. "They were working great when I left." As Joan turned to look at her daughter, she noticed a pile of 7 or 8 black plastic trash bags at the far end of the porch. There were also 2 cardboard boxes on the patio table and 2 large suitcases next to the railing. "What are these things doing here?" Joan asked. Joyce stood up and looked at the far end of the porch. "These are all your things, Mom, everything. All your clothes are in garbage bags along with all your shoes and all your clothes from your dresser. Your cosmetics are in one of the cardboard boxes and your jewelry is in another. The 3 of us spent half of Saturday packing up your things. I packed my bags myself. I think they contain what you will need for your next work and leisure. You should bring suitcases, boxes, and any trash bags you can fit in your car. Richie will take whatever you leave behind and put it in the locker we rented for you." "What's going on here?" exclaimed Joan. She felt a knot begin to form in her stomach. "Dad knows everything about your extramarital affairs. Now we know everything," Joyce answered, not fully realizing what she was saying. "This is impossible. I was so careful." "Perhaps you were careful, Mom. Of course, Dad never suspected you of adultery, but your buddy Leonard Wilson wasn't. Beverly Dumont had been suspecting him of having an affair for months. On Friday night, they found out how two-faced you both were. This is impossible. I was in Atlanta and he was here. Beverly hired a private investigation company to spy on you and your boyfriend. She had the hotel room you were staying in bugged for video and audio. The live images were streamed onto the internet, which Beverly had set up for viewing and recording. Every move you made, every word you said in your hotel room was noticed and recorded. "Oh, no!" Joan screamed and collapsed on the steps next to her daughter. This can't be real." After Beverly left Daddy alone on Friday night, Daddy continued to watch you two have fun. I think it almost killed him. That night, he got very drunk and finally passed out on the couch in front of the computer. I came home early Saturday morning to find him asleep on the couch. When I tried to wake him up, I noticed that the computer was on and it was showing two people having sex. After watching for a few minutes, I realized it was you and Mr. Jerk. I let out an involuntary scream that woke up Dad. When he realized it was me and saw what I was watching, he slammed the computer lid and said, "You weren't supposed to see that." I started crying and asking Dad what was happening. He didn't want to tell me, but I made him tell me everything. We even turned the computer back on so I could see what was going on between you and Mr. Jerk. I made Dad take a shower and get cleaned up. I then made a Virgin Mary to help him with his hangover, followed by a light breakfast and coffee. Away from the computer, we tried to make a plan of what we were going to do. Saturday afternoon. Richie came back from his soccer match and we told him what was going on. We all cried a lot, and then I got angry. We all got angry. How dare you do something like that to our dad? Based on what you did and what you said, Richie and I have decided to kick you out. Dad agreed. We spent the rest of the day packing up all your things. You will not spend another day in this house with our dad. Joan stammered, "But where should I go? What should I do?" Dad was kind enough to get a room at the Hilton Extended Living near your office. He paid you 3 months' rent. By the way, this is the same thing Beverly does for her husband, except she only pays for his room for 1 month. Maybe you two can meet up tonight, compare notes and entertain each other again. And maybe when Mr. Jerk's lease is up, he can move in with you because he won't have a job that makes him a lot of money. "I don't want to leave my house," Joan screamed. "I love Bill. He is my life. I couldn't live without him." Without emotion, Joyce replied, "You'll have to leave. Nobody wants you here anymore. Not Dad, not Richie, not me. Also, you should know that Dad has an appointment with his lawyer on Monday. He's going to file for divorce." "No, no, 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 please no," Joan answered. Joyce continued her blitz. "Dad intends to keep this house for himself. After all, this is his place of work. Plus, he'll keep the house because Richie and I will be living with him, and he will have custody of Richie since he is still a minor, but already old enough to choose which parent he wants to live with. There will be no child support and no alimony for you because you make a very good income working as a real estate broker. Dad, who fully funded your IRA, will allow you to keep it, but will no longer make any payments into it. In addition, you will now be responsible for paying for your vehicle, auto insurance, maintenance, and property taxes." Joan looked into her daughter's unsympathetic eyes. "How can you be so insensitive? Dad told me many times how much he fell in love with you when you first met. He said he fell in love with me at the same time. He told me that he couldn't have loved me any less if you and he had had more daughters after you got married. And I couldn't love him more, even if he were my biological father. I'm Daddy's girl. He took care of you and me for 20 years. He's given us a beautiful home, wonderful vacations, and is sending Richie and me to college. When I found out what you did to my dad, it killed all my affection for you. How could you do this to him? What made you do this? Tell me why." Joan, still sobbing, said, "At first I just succumbed to the pressure to sell the house. A handsome and charming man offered to buy an expensive house for the asking price if I slept with him. To show Bill that I could be a successful real estate salesman and contribute to the family finances rather than sit at home and do nothing. A few months later, something similar happened, although I must admit that I became more flirtatious with this client. After that, it became obvious that I could use sex to sell houses. It didn't happen that often, maybe a couple times a year, but it seemed like it was just a factor in the selling process. I knew a few other female agents who did the same, some more than others. Then Leonard came into the office about 8 months ago. He was marketing Dumont's staging business and making presentations to my sales agents. Some of them started using it to stage the houses they were selling. As a result, he came to the office more and more often. He openly flirts with me. I thought he was not only charming, but also handsome. We started going to lunch together. It got to the point where we held hands, hugged, and eventually kissed. Then one day, he took me to one of the houses my office had for sale. He wanted to show me how good it looked since he furnished it. The production included a bed. Soon, we were in bed together. The sex was great, good enough that I didn't want to give it up. He felt the same. That's how we started an affair. I thought I was being very careful, but apparently I wasn't. I never meant to hurt your father. I made it a point to be as gentle with him as always. I thought he would never suspect. Joyce spoke up. You were careful, Mom. Dad never guessed what you became. Unfortunately, Mr. Asshole wasn't as careful as you, and Beverly became suspicious of him. In the end, using the services of a private detective agency, she found out the truth. She instigated her own little sting operation to finally find out what your relationship with Mr. Asshole was. Please, baby, don't send me away. This is my home. Your father needs me, Joan pleaded. I don't think so, Mom, Joyce replied. For as long as I can remember, Dad cooked Richie and me breakfast in the morning. He also cooked our school lunches. Since he worked from home and set his own schedule, he went grocery shopping and took clothes to the dry cleaner. The only thing he doesn't do is clean the house and do the laundry. For this we have maid services. He also often cooked dinner when you said you would be late for one reason or another. Joan continued to prove she was right. But your father needs me for other things, like communication and intimacy. I don't think Daddy is more interested in friendship or sex with you. Besides, I'll be there from now on. I'm moving back home and will be commuting to classes for the next few years. Richie is going to do the same thing. We're going to take care of Dad. Besides, Dad is still a handsome man. We've already convinced him to shave his beard. I'm going to sign him up for a gym and help him lose 20 pounds. And I will prepare nutritious food for him, which will help too. When he starts struggling with weight, I plan to take him with me to get a whole new wardrobe, including suits, sport coats, casual clothes, shoes, etc. Both Richie and I are going to take him out of the house more often. We are going to take him to school, sporting events, and theater shows. The Pope will become much more cosmopolitan and less reserved. As for female communication and intimacy, I have a pretty math teacher who has been divorced for a long time. Her son and daughter are in college. I think she and Dad would make a cute couple. Also, I have a young woman in my computer art class who is a widow, who is going to school under the government's survivors bill, because her husband was killed 2 years ago in the Middle East. She has a little girl at home who is just adorable. She and Dad would also be a cute couple. And don't forget Beverly Dumont. She is a very beautiful woman, with a magnificent figure. I wouldn't mind if they had a relationship. Joan interrupted. Do you know Leonard's wife? Where did you meet her? Beverly came home late in the morning. She's a very elegant woman and didn't deserve what you and Asshole did to her. Beverly, Dad, Richie, and I all had lunch together. Joan sensed the depth of Joyce's anger. It's late, Mom. Before you go, I have something for you. First of all, I have the address of your new house and the key to your apartment. Joyce handed Joan a manila envelope. Next, I have a collection of DVDs for you. Beverly brought them when she visited us today. Maybe you and Asshole can have some fun with them in the evenings. After receiving the gifts, Joan fell onto the steps of the porch. These were physical signs that her future had indeed changed in the unimaginable way that Joyce had described it. Now, Mom, it's time for me to go. Tonight I'm meeting Dad and Richie at a nice restaurant where we're going to make plans for the future. Please, Joan begged, is there anything I can do to make the pain go away? To earn a second chance? To be forgiven? I can't think of anything, Mom. Maybe over time we'll come up with something. Richie and I will probably forgive you eventually because you're our mom. Dad may also forgive you, but it won't be soon. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one. Second story. Prom was 2 months away and I was getting ready to ask Tracy to be my prom date. I know some guys asked for their girlfriends as early as 3 months before the date, but I didn't need that because Tracy was my girl. Always was my girl. And prom was a done deal. Hell, graduation was a done deal since I was 5 years old. Tracy Batson and I have been neighbors since her family moved in next to mine when I was 5 and she was 4. We met a few days after the family moved. I was playing alone in the backyard when I noticed someone running towards me. I got up in time when she reached me, a short-haired blonde girl with green eyes and freckles all over her face. She reached out to me and hugged me tightly. I let her do it. When we uncoupled, she knelt down next to me and started playing with my Tonka trucks. That was all. No fanfare. Best friends forever. Tracy and I didn't play together every day. Sometimes she'd go off to play with the girls, sometimes I'd go off to play with the boys, but most of the time, we'd play with Tracy, me and the others when they showed up. I understood perfectly well that she was a girl, but for some reason, I never looked at her the same way as at other girls. Sometimes other girls had lice. I don't know why, but Tracy didn't have that. We remained best friends through elementary, middle, and high school. While other boys and girls were starting to pair off, Tracy and I were already a couple. Other couples would go on dates, but Tracy and I would just do things together. This wasn't a date. We just did what we've always done. I was 14, and she was 13, when we kissed for the first time, and like everything else for us, it was done easily and without fanfare. We were leaving the evening cinema. I put my arm around her waist, she clung to me, and we kissed. It wasn't anything special for the two of us, although I knew we both felt something electric. After that, we kissed many more times. Our parents seemed to take everything for granted. I was part of her family, and she was part of mine. I could count on being yelled at or spanked if I misbehaved in her house, and so did she, if she misbehaved in mine. Our friends also took our relationship in stride, perhaps because it seemed like we were always together. In the area, it was clear that we were together, and no one tried to come between us. Outside the area, things were different, and Tracy had guys running after her. She was developed in all the right places, and although I was always worried that she would find someone she wanted more than me, I never worried too much because we were we. She was mine, and I was hers. End of story. At least that's what I thought. As always, after class ended, Tracy met me in my car in the parking lot. As we were driving home, I looked to the side and asked where she wanted to go after graduation. Silence. 5 seconds. 10. 15. This was not good. I pulled over to the side of the road as soon as I could find a free space. When I pulled over, I put the car in park and turned my full attention to Tracy, who had started crying and looked like she had just eaten a bag of lemons. I already told Justin Morrow that I was going to prom with him, Stevie, Tracy stammered. For a second, I lost my breath. I shook my head in disbelief. Then he looked straight into Tracy's eyes. He invited me last month. I thought it would be cool to go with someone else. You know, different guy, different perspective. You know, there's always me and you. What's the big deal? Ah, I thought my head was going to explode. What's going on, Tracy? Another perspective? You're kidding me. She burst into tears. I started to reach out to her to console her, but then common sense hit me over the head. We are we, Tracy. We are we, I shouted. You are my girlfriend. My girlfriend won't go to prom with another guy just for a different perspective. Look, Stevie, I've never dated another guy, and you've never dated another girl. You know you're leaving for college in a few months, and we'll both have to date other people. At least, Tracy, why didn't you wait until I left? That would be kind-hearted at the very least. Tracy mumbled something, sobbing. I wasn't even listening, turning on the program and driving us home. At home, I grumbled for 4 days. I didn't go to Tracy's house, and she didn't come to me. Both parents were not born yesterday. I found out from Joyce that Tracy will be going to the ball with Justin Morrow. Joyce cried as she told me this, Stevie. Would you like to add anything? Mom asked at dinner on the 4th day. Dad raised both eyebrows. My little sister Ellie fidgeted in her seat. Only that you and Joyce can stop making wedding plans for us. We're so sorry, Stevie. Really, it's a pity. You know, if you need to talk, Dad said. Anyone want 2 tickets to prom? I asked. trying to sound as if I was joking. Justin Morrow was more of an acquaintance than a friend. I had no idea if he knew Tracy and I were a couple, but it didn't matter. If Tracy was really mine, she would have told Justin about it instead of consenting. I moped around for a couple of weeks, and then, as I was getting out of the car after school one day, I heard Allison Warnock giggling about something with some of her friends. Allison was Laura Warnock's little sister who lived across the street from me and hung out with a mutual group of friends in the neighborhood. Laura has been my friend for about as long as Tracy has, and was probably Tracy's second best friend after me, at least until 3 weeks ago. Allison was a freshman at our high school, about 6'3", rail thin, with blonde hair, and absolutely adorable. I've known Allison since she was 2, and we've always gotten along great. She was a little eccentric and reckless, and was often my partner when we had chicken fights on the lawn or in the pool, and she sat on my shoulders. She was so light that I could carry her with one hand, which gave me the opportunity to use a free hand to fight, giving our team a clear advantage. Anyway, up until this point, I'd never thought of Allison as anything more than just a skinny, flat-chested sister. But I admit, I've always had a special place for my chicken wrestling partner. Hell, I already had tickets, so I made a somewhat awkward request. I called her away from the twins, another pair of 15-year-olds in our area, and simply asked her to be my date. Her alabaster face turned bright pink, and she lowered her ears to the ground. I knew I had taken her by surprise. "Shouldn't you ask my sister if you're not going with Tracy? You have always been one of her closest friends," she said, looking up at my face at the last second. "No, I have to ask the girl Warnock who I really want to go with, and that's you, even if there's no chicken fighting at the prom." "I'm not asking you to be Tracy's replacement. I'm asking you to be my friend. Can I ask Mom and Dad first? I'd like to go, but until I'm 16, Dad says I have to ask permission." "Oh yeah, I don't want Big Ed to be mad at me," I replied. Allison's father, Big Ed, was a 5-foot 100-pound bear, and no sane person would want him to be mad at him. But as much as I feared Big Ed, I knew that the real strength in the family was Allison's mother, Barbara, who was every bit the Irish Catholic everyone had read about in the legends. God forbid the boy to touch even one of his daughters. Barbara would probably tear off both his ears and scratch out both his eyes. In the evening, the phone rang, but not to me. Barb called directly to the boss. My mother and I heard my mother assure Barb in great detail that I would be a complete gentleman. When my mother gives her word, everything happens that way, which suited me quite well. The next morning, I didn't even have time to get to my locker when Laura was already in front of me and cursing, "What the hell, Stevie? Am I chopped liver? We've been friends forever, spend half the time together, and you ask my little sister to prom? What's happened?" Laura practically screamed at me. I raised my hands in surrender. "Until a few weeks ago, I was sure that I was going to prom with Tracy, but apparently I was mistaken," I said. After she, figuratively speaking, gave me a turnaround. A turn. I had no intention of going at all. Then I finally decided that I would go, but only to have fun, without any attachment. Allison makes me laugh and I want to laugh. We'll go and have some fun, and then I'll finish school and go study. Laura let out a small scream, and then inhaled about half of the oxygen in the hallway while everyone watched us. She stared at me, and then snorted. I looked at everyone who was looking at me, shrugged, and went to my first lesson of the day. I think I've lost 2 friends. Graduation was as good as I could have hoped for. Allison looked stunning in her navy blue dress with her hair styled and her makeup on for the first time. I never had the urge to throw her over my shoulders for a chicken fight, but I definitely did have the urge to pull her close to me for a slow dance, which is what I did. Already at the second dance, she clung to my body, and so we danced until the end of the evening. Yes, I saw Tracy and Justin from a distance several times throughout the evening. Yes, she looked great in a rather body-hugging green dress, and to be fair, Justin looked pretty sharp in a black suit. When I saw them, they seemed to be enjoying themselves. The truth is, I didn't try to pay attention to Tracy and Justin because I really enjoyed spending time with Allison. She was fun and funny and sexy in her skinny chick kind of way. Several times I thought that in the next year or so, she would turn into a real heartbreaker. I almost wished I could stay here to see this prediction come true. We went to a very brunch at a local IHOP with a few other couples. Then I drove us home. I parked in front of my house and walked her across the street to the porch. Then I plucked up my courage and kissed her goodnight, with a little bit of tongue before she hugged me tighter and ran her tongue over mine. After that, we did it a second time until I heard a stir outside the Warnock's door and decided I should take the hint and walk home. The following Saturday morning after prom, Tracy walked into my house, as she had done for years until 2 months ago. Mom and I looked at each other in surprise as Tracy walked over to the couch in the family room and moved closer to me. She sat silently for about a minute while we watched Premier League football and then whispered in my ear that we should talk on the back patio. I protested, but caught the look on Mom's face and knew I had to follow Tracy outside. "Don't you think this has been going on long enough, Stevie? It's been a week since graduation ended and you still haven't talked to me? As I already told you, it was a one-time thing. I dated someone else, and so did you, although I must say, you surprised me with your choice. You definitely didn't make Laura happy." "I wasn't trying to make Laura happy. I was trying to make myself happy," I grumbled. "Okay, you've made yourself happy, I think, but now it's time to get back to normal life. I'm back, I'm yours, and you're mine. At least until the next time you decide to take a break from me," I interrupted. Tracy looked confused. "I can't say I didn't like prom, but I'm done with it." "We're back to being ourselves, Stevie," she said. "No, Tracy, we will never be us again," I said. "You're done with us forever." "Don't be like that, Stevie," Tracy replied, holding back tears. I got up from the chair, went into the house, took the car keys, and drove away. An hour later, after Tracy gave up and went home, my mom texted me. "I met with Allison several times over the summer before I left for college. We always had fun, but we were both realistic. I had 4 years of college ahead of me, and she had 3 years of high school. We agreed that it was best for us to go our separate ways, although we didn't rule out casual dates in the summer when I was home. A little after New Year's, Tracy called me from school. It was her senior year and prom. She called to let me know that she was making amends for ruining my prom and that I could ask her to prom this year. "This is a generous offer," I told her, "but I'm just not ready for it." I suggested that Justin might be available. Since they had a good time last year, maybe they should do it again. She quietly hung up. In the summer, when I was at home, Tracy sometimes came to me and made pitches that we should get back together. She even hinted to both my parents that she and I should get back together. It also explains why I had to endure an hour-long lecture from her mother about how good we were together and how I shouldn't see the forest for the trees. Of course, because of the whole story with Tracy's mom, I was polite, but I still couldn't give her an answer that would make her happy. For his part, Tracy's father couldn't look me in the eye. I think he agreed with my position but did not want to say it out loud. I knew Allison had had her share of dates after all. She was turning into a true, stunning beauty when she finally got in shape and had small but perky breasts. I went on dates too because I'm a pretty decent guy with a healthy sex drive. I kept track of Allison enough to know that halfway through her senior year she didn't have a steady boyfriend, so while I was home for Christmas, I asked her if she wanted me to go to prom with her. She smiled widely and said, "Yes. 3 years has matured Allison's body and mind, but even though she's grown into a real hot babe, she's never let her beauty overshadow her fun-loving personality. We had a great time at prom, and an even better time afterwards when we first got to know each other better." Hoping for this outcome, I booked a hotel room, but I wasn't going to push Allison into it. We started the evening as great friends, and just like 3 years ago, Allison pressed her body against mine every time we hit the dance floor. Her lips tasted amazing, and we spent a lot of time kissing. Towards the end of the evening, I asked if she wanted to have some more fun with her friends or if she wanted to go to the hotel with me. She didn't seem surprised or upset that I'd booked a room for us. In my room, I had a bottle of champagne and a container of strawberries. We took our time in bed, kissed, joked, laughed, and talked. I don't know how long we did this until we found ourselves in front of the bed, where I carefully began to remove her burgundy silk and lace dress. As I slowly stripped her down to her burgundy bra and panties, she looked nothing like the skinny tomboy I remember it as a 12-year-old. We both stripped my clothes down to my panties before I turned my attention back to her. I slowly began to explore and caress her body. Since Allison was a normal child, I assumed she wasn't a virgin, but I didn't think she had much experience with sex, and it only took a few minutes for me to be convinced I was right. Covering her entire body with kisses and bringing her to climax 3 times with his caresses. But I didn't stop continued work on Allison, bringing it even to half a dozen climaxes before slowly creeping up her body. We started out slow and gentle, kissing as we went, and then gradually picked up speed. After about 10 minutes, she started making inarticulate sounds again, and had one final orgasm. After another 10 minutes, I came like a freight train and kissed her afterwards. We started out slow and gentle, kissing as we went, and then gradually picked up speed. After about 10 minutes, she began making inarticulate sounds again and experienced her final climax. After another 10 minutes, I also came to the finish line and kissed her after that. We snuggled quietly together for a while before we started talking and laughing again. We got dressed and left, and I got Allison home by 1:45 a.m., 15 minutes ahead of Big Ed's appointment for the night. Allison and I were together for the summer after she graduated, but we went our separate ways again when she left for her junior year of college in Iowa, and I left for my senior year of college in Indiana. We emailed occasionally, and although we remained great friends, we both knew we were moving in different directions. I was graduating from college in May, and she had 3 more years of school ahead of her. They say timing is everything, and it seems like our timing just wasn't right. I had to give Tracy credit for her persistence. She kept her finger on the pulse of the game, sending periodic emails gently reminding me that she would drop everything in an instant if I so much as said the word. I politely reminded her that our ship separated at night, and we both had our own lives. I got a good job at a mid-sized accounting firm in Ohio and started studying for a master's degree, thinking I would someday want to be a college professor. I know it sounds nerdy, but I really enjoyed connecting with people through math. While taking college classes, I interacted with many female students, and my social life was more in that direction than in any other, until Molly came into my world and pulled me out of my meager existence. Molly was a divorced woman with a child who had recently started working in the audit department at my firm, with long, bright orange hair, freckles everywhere, and skin whiter than white. She also had large breasts and captivating green eyes, which I did not notice until one day during a birthday party in the office break room when she spilled hot coffee on my shirt. Everyone knows what I'm talking about, coffee and cake for a colleague in the break room. Apparently, she had taken her cake a little before me, but as she turned to walk away from the table, the square of cake she had just taken flew off her plate, and in an attempt to stop it, she jerked her left hand to the side, creating a splatter that hit on my chest. It hurt like hell. That's what I remember. But when I raised my head, I got lost in those green eyes, and suddenly I couldn't feel the pain anymore. It wasn't until another employee rushed towards me with paper towels and started dabbing that I felt the touch again and cried out in pain. Molly immediately began to apologize, and I went to the toilet. An hour later, those mesmerizing green eyes showed up in my office with another piece of cake, and 5 minutes later I had a date for the following Friday evening. I have to admit, I was shocked when I rang Molly's doorbell on Friday night, and it was answered by a teenager with red hair. He had to be at least 16 years old, which meant Molly was probably older than I thought. It's not that her age put me off, but I was surprised when she admitted that she was 42. She later said that she had been married for 16 years and divorced for 4 years. She looked gorgeous in what I would call mom's version of the infamous little black dress, as it came a couple of inches above her knees and showed just a hint of her large breasts. I tried not to be too conspicuous because I knew her son was watching me. Perhaps because Molly was raising a teenager, she seemed, despite her age, to be very well versed in the world of youth. It took me about 5 minutes to come to terms with it all, but after that, It felt just like every other date I'd ever been on. We enjoyed a delicious meal and then went to a concert organized by the local Philharmonic. Not the wildest date I've ever been on, but good enough that I knew I wanted to try again. Maybe it had something to do with her age, but I was a little shy about making a sexual move towards Molly. She was, of course, quite sexy, but something about her scared me, to say the least. However, she clearly noticed that something was wrong, and on our 6th date, she broached the subject. We had a bourbon and barbecue night and then went to a country western dance club for some dancing. Neither of us had ever danced before, but we had a great time learning from the veterans at the club. I held on to Molly all night and knew she was picking up on the vibrations of the night. But I was again wondering how I should start when Molly put her hands behind my head and pulled me in for a heated kiss. Her body was pressed against mine, and I know she felt my arousal growing. "I know you're worried about my age, Stevie, but I'm not going to break the buzz. We must end this night horizontally," Molly whispered. An embarrassed smile spread across my face from ear to ear. I took her hand and led her out of the club. 10 minutes after we got to my apartment, I began to caress and please her. Molly may have been the oldest woman I've ever slept with, but she was incredibly energetic and knew how to use her experience. "Ah, fuck, Stevie! Ah!" she screamed during her first climax. Thus, I gave her several climaxes, and then we tried more than one position throughout the evening and night, and every time it was amazing. About a year later, a wedding invitation came in the mail and brought me to a screeching halt. It turned out that Allison had graduated from college about a year earlier and was getting married to the man she had dated in her senior year. We stopped texting and I lost track of her. She now lived in Illinois, but the wedding was to take place in New York, where her parents still lived. I took Molly with me and explained how everyone fit into this neighborhood celebration, because that's exactly what it really was. My parents were there, Big Ed, Barb, and Laura, Tracy and her parents. Drew Goldstein seemed like a nice enough guy, but it took a lot of internal reflection for me to be happy for Allison. I never got over my feelings for her, but it just wasn't meant to be. Shit happens. You have to move on with your life. However, I probably didn't make either Allison or Drew happy when she first introduced him to me a couple days before the wedding. We had such a history, and I was probably as close to the older brother as she was to accept me as one. "I'm very happy for you, Drew, but listen to me, and listen carefully," I said sharply, keeping a smile on my face. "If you hurt her, I'll break your nose. Understood?" Both Allison and Drew seemed slightly taken aback by my statement. Drew was smart enough to nod in understanding as I shook his hand. Laura later said that Big Ed approved of my threat. Tracy had apparently finally forgotten about me. She showed up with her husband in tow and a pregnant belly. He looked like he was straight out of a 60s biker movie, and neither Joyce nor Tim Batson looked very pleased. Tracy and I didn't talk much all weekend, but when we did, we were polite. Molly and I never sought exclusivity, and I knew she was seeing others while I chose not to. We never discussed the others until a few months after Allison's wedding, when Molly cooked a sumptuous Irish dinner and told me she had news for me. It turned out that she had been dating a nice guy, a couple of years older than herself. For most of the time she had been dating me, and he started talking about exclusivity. She decided that she should tell me this information. I wasn't entirely surprised by the statement, and certainly couldn't blame her if she wanted to pursue a more secure relationship. Besides, the two of them probably had more in common. She began to show emotions and, it seems, even apologized, but I gently stopped her. "Don't ever apologize for doing what's right for you, baby," I said. "You have always been completely frank and honest with me. If you want commitments, and he can give them, but I can't, then that's on my conscience. You are a beautiful woman and a beautiful soul. I hope everything works out great for the two of you." I really meant what I said. I got up from the table, kissed her very tenderly on the cheek, and left. In a conversation about 5 years later, my mother broke the somewhat sad news of Allison's divorce. I say somewhat sad because, truth be told, I still had some feelings for this woman, but the truth is, it's always sad when someone's marriage goes down the drain. From my point of view, you marry a person thinking it will be a lifelong commitment, and when it turns out not to be, it's devastating. I felt sorry for her, but I didn't try to contact her because we weren't in touch. I was more than surprised when I received a message from Allison 6 months later. It read, "Are you still there?" I guessed she wasn't sure I still had the same phone number. I was very surprised to see who the message was from, but I didn't respond to it for about 3 days. In the end, I answered with no meaning. Yes, 3 more days passed before I received a call one evening. "Do you have a few minutes for an old friend?" she asked. "I really need to spend some time with a non-relative or friend who is trying to cheer me up. I know we haven't interacted much over the years, but you've always been honest with me and made me laugh. It's been a long time since I've enjoyed a good laugh." Not being a beautiful woman, I didn't understand how difficult it was for Allison in the years following our separation. In college and after, she was always choosing a date. She was invited to all sorts of events and social outings, and it must have been exhausting. When she married Drew, the handsome son of a prominent Illinois financier, the good times seemed to last forever, as they both got good jobs with his father's company and enjoyed a very comfortable life in a new home in the Chicago suburbs. Things went south when she found out that Drew had been cheating on her for at least a year with the daughter of an old family friend. I agreed to go to Chicago for a long weekend to give her a shoulder to lean on. I know she sounded upset on the phone, but I was shocked when she showed up at the door of her apartment in a bad part of town. She looked like she hadn't eaten or showered in days, and her eyes seemed haunted. What happened to my little chicken wrestling buddy? She looked like crap. I'm sure my mouth dropped open, and then she started crying. Like most guys, I get completely lost in the presence of a crying woman. All I could do was hug Allison and walk her back to the apartment. We spent the next 2 hours on the shabby couch as she sobbed into my shirt and rambled about her grief. Having learned about the betrayal, Allison kicked Drew out of the house, but then Drew's father intervened in the matter. Allison didn't read the prenuptial agreement she signed with Drew, and 9 months later Allison was divorced and living in that apartment, with no job and almost no life. Drew's father made sure his HR department ruined Allison's chances of getting a good job in the area, and she worked at a dry cleaner. Allison and I talked a lot Friday night and all day Saturday. As soon as I arrived at her apartment, we hugged, but after that, the most physical thing we did was occasionally hold hands while talking. Everything was somehow wrong. I also felt bad seeing Allison so broken and how her life was going. I needed to give her a clean outlet, so I turned to the only man I knew who cared more about Allison than I did. I explained the situation to Big Ed as I understood it, and he promised that he and Barb would be in Chicago the next morning to take Allison home to upstate New York. When I told Allison the news, she almost tore my ears off, but I knew it was the right move. As I helped her pack her meager belongings, she still called me every name I knew. "I am a 30-year-old woman. I don't need to be treated like a 5-year-old girl, you idiot." This was one of the nicest words she said to me while I was helping her pack her things on Monday. I kept in touch with Allison weekly through Big Ed and Barb. Allison stubbornly refused to talk to me. My life went on. I dated several women, including one for almost a year. I was already close to asking her an important question when she told me that she had met someone she wanted to date and did not want to cheat on me, so we needed to break up. I told her I appreciated her honesty and returned my deposit for the engagement ring I had purchased. About 6 months after sending Allison back to New York, I took a couple days off and went to Chicago for the weekend. Did some homework and waited outside Drew Goldstein's Mercedes when he got off work on Friday at 5 o'clock. When I approached him in the parking lot, he didn't seem to remember me right away. But as soon as I took my place, I saw a spark of recognition flash in his eyes. But he didn't have time to raise his arms, and I attacked him with all the strength that was in my body of 83 meters and 82 kilograms. I felt his nose explode as he hit the ground. "I warned you what would happen if you hurt Allison. Apparently you forgot." "But I don't," I said quietly. Interestingly, although there were many people in the parking lot who saw me hitting Drew, no one made a move to help him or stop me from leaving. I guess the boss's son just wasn't popular, I was back in Indiana just a few hours later, still expecting the police to show up at my door because of my attack on Drew, and was surprised when that didn't happen. I was also surprised 2 weeks later when Allison called me. "The bird on my tail told me that a couple of weeks ago you trimmed Drew's nose," Allison said. "I thought you were just being a jerk by threatening him all these years. Now I don't know how to thank you. By the way, Dad said he would send you a bottle of Glenmorangie aged 18 years. I had another idea for how Allison could thank me, and I took a week off to help her do it. We spent most of that week together, and by the time I left to return to Indiana, we had become a long-distance, monogamous couple. We lived long distance for about 6 months, after which she came to live with me in Indiana. Big Ed and Barb weren't entirely on board with these terms, but given our history, they cut us some slack. However, this only lasted about a year, as within 2 months, Allison accepted my marriage proposal, and 10 months after that, we got married. I love irony. So, we got married exactly 17 years after our first date, my graduation. It may have taken us a long time to be together, but as they say, good things are worth waiting for. Allison and I just celebrated our 30th anniversary at a party thrown by our children, Eddie and Rosalie, and their spouses. It wasn't always perfect, but it was as close as I probably deserved. By the way, we get a Christmas card from Tracy every year. She has a 4th husband and 4 children. Although I didn't know it at the time, someone upstairs was keeping an eye on me. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one. Listening to the next one. Listening to the next one. Listening to the next one.